Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaron Higgins. I'm with Strategic Healthcare Partners. I will be your moderator and host for today's webinar, but before we get started, some housekeeping items that we need to make sure get taken care of. First off, as you probably already saw the notification on the top of your Teams screen, this meeting is being recorded. We will be posting a recording of today's meeting, hopefully later this afternoon on our website at shpllc.com/webinars. There will not be a slide deck with today's session. Rather, it's going to be more of an informative session given to you. But we will be posting a recording hopefully later today. So we have teamed up with Capital Strategy, specifically with Travis Lins. Oof, boy, sorry. My tongue got tied there with Travis Lindley and Devin Kretzel. They will be highlighting the changes coming down the pipeline for the 2022 legislative session here in Georgia. But first, to get things started, we'll actually hear from Mike Scribner. So Mike, the floor is yours.
Yeah, this is more just kind of give a little bit deeper introduction to Travis and Devin. We've been working with them for the past several years as our legislative affairs lead. Several of you know who they are because we have typically turned to them not only for the kind of education that we're talking about here, but also to fight specific issues as you guys have encountered Blue and United and other battles we've gone down the line. They've been whether or not you've seen them or not, they're the ones we turn to when it's time to go to get to CMS or up the chain at the Department of Insurance to go fight your battles on their behalf. And so I guess a couple of things. One, know that they're a resource for you because we have hired them to help you. And number two, they've been an extremely valuable resource. And so as we go forward into the session, you'll be good information here, but also good follow up throughout the year with other issues. So with that, I'll toss it to Travis and Devin to have at it. Thanks, guys, for doing this.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks, Mike. And good afternoon to everybody. Happy New Year. 12 days in and officially 2 days into the legislative session. Rejoin you today from the state capitol, where it's been an eventful week here in Georgia, as all of you know. They gavelled in on Monday to start the 22 legislative session. We're out yesterday as folks made their way back to the state, and today marks the second day of the session. So I have asked if it's too early to start counting down, but essentially pick up. Legislators will pick up exactly where they left off in the 2021 session, so the end of last March. This is the second term, second session of the term, and then we'll have a new General Assembly next year. As a reminder, all of those elections will get underway in May, and then, of course, next November. So a lot of change as we look forward. In terms of sort of logistically where we are with the legislative session, there were a few departures since we were last with folks in March and then again in the special session. We do have a slew of legislators that this will be their final legislative session. We're right now between 20 and 25 that have signaled they're either retiring, running for higher office, and there are actually a couple of others. We have one that's moving on to be ambassador. So some exciting changes for some of them. And then, of course, the election will determine if they move on to higher office. As many of you likely know, all constitutional officers and the General Assembly, as I mentioned, will be up for election next fall. So changes in the air. In terms of legislation where we engage over the next couple of weeks and through much of first quarter of this year, we expect behavioral health reform to be sort of center stage and be one of the sort of marquee items that they take up this morning. Good chunk of Atlanta's business community convened for the annual Eggs and Issues address where the governor, the speaker, and the lieutenant governor sort of unveil and talk in depth about their legislative priorities and agendas for the year. And mental health, behavioral health reform has been one of those key topics that each of them has spoken to, and we expect there to be legislation this year. Of course, the devil's always in the details, so it remains to be seen on what those reform efforts actually end up looking like in terms of legislation, but we anticipate knowing a lot more about where all of that's headed over the next 2 weeks. As with the last couple of legislative sessions, we anticipate additional prior authorization reform. Senator Kay Kirkpatrick and thankfully a caucus full of physicians that now are in the legislature. There are 5 as a point of reminder. Kay Kirkpatrick, orthopedist, is sort of championed this reform effort. She has had bills the last couple of sessions and has an additional sort of cleanup reform bill that we've been working on and anticipate action on that. Next up, we anticipate action in the vein of cleanup on the cannabis arena. There's been a number of efforts over the last couple of years while everybody gave the commission that was formed a couple of years ago time to get the program up and running. Earlier, or I guess late summer of 21, the commission finally rendered a decision on who could have a license, yet we're still mired in some legal battles. So it looks like there will be some additional reform on that front, whether it's this year or next. PBM reform, again, one of the themes over the last couple of years. We're up to about 4 pieces of legislation that are now law in an effort to continue to sort of rein in the practices of pharmacy benefit managers and their relationship with the state and certainly the patients of Georgia. So anticipate more reform on that front. And as always, over the last couple of sessions since COVID, we anticipate an extension in the COVID limited liability provisions. So we anticipate that probably, I would guess, we'll see some legislation on that front in the coming weeks as well. It'll simply extend it out another year, is everybody's gut. So as you can see there on the agenda before you, and this is meant to be interactive, as Aaron noted, please feel free to jump in and ask questions as we go, and we'll want to make sure we address everybody's questions or concerns about what you're hearing today. I will turn it over to Devin, that's going to sort of talk about some of the efforts that we've made on behalf of Strategic Health and all of you with the Department of Insurance. With that, Devin.
Thanks, Travis, and good afternoon. Good to see y'all. Thanks for jumping on today. So just briefly wanted to discuss the Georgia Department of Insurance and kind of where we stand as a team within Strategic Health. We've got a great working relationship with the current insurance commissioner, John King. He's assembled a great team, I would say, certainly one of the best in the past 15 or so years. They've been extremely helpful in moving forward some of the priorities of SHP as a whole. Of course, I know nobody here on the line ever has problem with insurance, but I do want to point out before we get too much into it that if you do have insurance issues, things that you're watching, I know Mike and John and the team certainly keep us apprised of that. But if you've got those issues, certainly don't hesitate to send them to us. We do keep the executive council to the commissioner. We keep in touch with him almost on a bi-weekly basis on all things insurance. But to bring you up to speed, currently the Georgia Department of Insurance is in the process of finalizing, and believe it'll be finalized at the end of this week, is a market conduct review on Blue Cross Blue Shield of Georgia. As you all know, there's been some significant issues with them, not only in the past year, but really over the past 5 to 10 years. What this consists of is they're doing internal, external audits of email accounts within Blue Cross Blue Shield, how they are handling legacy agreements, code uploads for you all in your practices, and those sorts of things. We've pushed to the Georgia Department of Insurance and the Commissioner's Executive Council a multitude of these issues, not only through the insurance portal, which I know most of you have filed issues under there, but we've been sending the Executive Council those things as well in the interim to kind of help them along. So all that to say, this process has been underway about a little over a year now. And there will be, as we understand it, some significant dollar fines that will be levied against Blue Cross Blue Shield of Georgia, upwards of, we've heard, low or 10 figures. My guess is that it will probably end up being somewhere in the 9 figures after all things are said and done, and there's some sort of consent agreement. I would note that consent agreement and whatever comes out of this market conduct review will be, to some extent, will be public knowledge. Our hope is, and certainly in conversations that we've had with Mike and John on y'all's team, that they do change their behavior. It's not just, okay, we pay a $9 fine, 9-figure fine, and it's over. The hope is that they actually start to play by the rules, and then it also goes down the chain to the Uniteds and the Humanas and so on and so forth, that they're all keeping in line. So that's where we stand on the market conduct review. Of course, if you have questions on it, certainly don't hesitate to ask. We're happy to help. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Are there any other carriers that are under that level of scrutiny? I know obviously United would be a close second in the pain in the butt category, but anything like that going on with them?
Nothing at this time, Mike. They have indicated that United would be the probably the one that would kind of be next in the chute. But I think Blue Cross Blue Shield of Georgia is likely the biggest offender. And what we have to keep in mind as well in all of this is Blue Cross Blue Shield does administer the state health benefit plan for the state of Georgia. So I think there's a lot of factors here at play. I believe that the state has eyes on it as they go into, and I know we'll discuss this here in just a few, but as they go into reprocurement, not only for the CMOs, but also for the state health benefit plan.
Devin.
Yes, sir.
So do you and Travis foresee that there may be any potential legislation that will be proposed during this session as a result of this fine, or really as a result of this conduct review, that would impact not just the Blues, but the conduct of all the payers?
Yes, sir. And great question, John. There's been some talk by legislators actually as early as right before the holidays, specifically reaching out to the Department of Insurance, because they've been hearing from their constituents. I'm sure as y'all have been peppering them, we have too. But the legislators are irritated, to say the least. They're hearing from folks on a daily and hourly basis of just the poor behavior, is really the best way to put it, of the Blues. All that to say, they've reached out to DOI and said we're going to drop some legislation as far as kind of trying to get these folks back in line. Now, what that looks like, we don't know. We haven't seen any of that, but what the hope of the market conduct review and the hope of the timing of this, the timeliness, is that they'll be able to come out. Georgia DOI will come out with kind of where they are in the process, not only with the fines, but the consent agreement, and hopefully put a little bit of that down, with a big asterisk there. You do have the physicians, as Travis mentioned, here in the legislature, the Kay Kirkpatricks of the world, the Lee Hawkins representative in the House, who has taken a big stance on the insurance reform. those folks are heavily looking at some sort of behavior mechanism, if you will, for legislation.
And Devin, just to remind the group here, when we think United and some of the other carriers, Humana also included, the issues we tend to have are more on the MA side than the commercial side. And I get that limits our ability to turn to the DOI, where I know we've had these discussions, but for the group, where should we turn for those kinds of issues, and who is our regulatory support for that?
Yeah,
or lack thereof, Devin, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, and that's a good question as well. Generally, Mike, that's all going to be pushed through the Georgia Department of Community Health. So we do have some contacts over there, and we can kind of transition into that if that works, Mike. As far as the Medicaid area,
Of course.
Georgia Department of Community Health, which administers Medicaid, they are currently in a posture with their staff or lack of staff. They've let go, I believe now we're at six or seven C-suite executives over there. So there's currently a commissioner, a deputy commissioner, and then a few folks peppered throughout some of the agencies, but their general counsel, their CFO, and the deputies to those individuals, they are all wiped clean at the moment. And we don't have any signs or signals at this point of who's going to fill those roles, including a Medicaid director. There's nobody that's officially in that role. So all that to say, I think, Mike, your point of lack of is probably kind of where we're at this time. However, we have built up a very good rapport with the current commissioner, Kaylee Noggle, as well as Deputy Commissioner Loke. If y'all will remember, he was in Governor Kemp's office from when he started his campaign all the way to date in his health policy advisor role. So I do think there's a champion in him, at least to where we can turn and point some of these MA issues, if any of those come up, which we know that they do. And Ryan has been helpful, especially with some of the getting some of the folks with their coding issues and getting those uploaded, as we've seen time and time again. And I know there's many of y'all out there that continue to deal with those sorts of things. That answer the question, Mike?
Yeah. In addition to that, you're talking about it from a Medicaid CMO perspective. For Medicare Advantage issues where the DOI typically doesn't have official jurisdiction. I know you guys, just by your relationship, we've been able to get them to engage a little bit on issues like that. But if it's a United Medicare issue going up to the feds, what's our typical game plan to play? Some of these guys have had massive recoupments from them in a highly inappropriate processes. And so what do we do about those? Where do we take those?
I think there's some opportunity with being that it is federal level. I think there's some opportunity to take those to our champions in the Georgia congressional delegation. They have been rather responsive. The Buddy Carters, the Austin Scotts of the world have answered those calls and at least been able to make the correct or the appropriate outreach. As y'all remember, we've done some of this legwork as well through HHS and had some contacts through that route. But that's, I think, Mike, probably the best route is to make sure that we're not only bringing it to their attention, but there's some sort of, okay, here's physical, paperwork, emails, what have you, that we can kind of push to them and show them what the step-by-step situation is in the lack of accountability on that front.
Devin, I apologize, Michael.
No, go.
Devin, when you talk about going to HHS or going to the federal level, I'm assuming it's more challenging when it's one-off issues. So I would assume that when you're going there, we need practices in hospitals to be very diligent in bringing that information forward, so that there's at least a visualization of the overall impact and the significant impact it's having to many providers in the state. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, an excellent point, John. I mean, we have to keep in mind, you know, these congressional folks and even the state folks here at the State House, they deal with a multitude of issues on a daily basis on any given topic. And in our minds, if you've got a show in mass, no matter how you look at it, if you can compile stuff over time period, or even if it's, you know, over a week, and say, you know, here's what we as SHP as a whole and the folks that are within SHP see over the past week, and it's a aggregate of information. That's the stuff that we need, John, to your point, versus just kind of the one-off things. While we recognize those are important, if we can see trends and things of that nature that then we can push to our friends, that's the ideal way to not only hopefully get resolved, but at least get our folks, get our friends to listen to us and realize that there is something here. It's not just a one-off sort of issue.
The other piece, obviously we have the congressional delegation, but the two United States senators also have and provide a great resource to us, but they've got to have some bona fides, but the ability to go to them statewide. And they have their own set of Senate liaisons that work with the various federal programs that we may or may not be having problems with. So that's the other. But I think it's a natural opportunity to make a plug, in addition to making sure that you've got a good working relationship with your members of the Georgia General Assembly. Cannot emphasize enough knowing the staffs and ideally the member that represents you, because those sometimes can be very helpful as these issues arise. Any other questions? I see Dr. Warnock asked about, and Mike, John, y'all may know, I'm not aware, I gather listening to the world of physician groups nationally, that Blue Cross and their behavior precedes them in other states, but I'm not aware specifically about South Carolina. Mike, John, are y'all?
I am not, and that's obviously not an anthem state, so it wouldn't automatically be the same thing.
All right. Next up, we've got, what's that?
I'm sorry. I was just saying to you, Yvette, that we'll follow up on that and let her know. You're muted, Devin.
Okay, you got me, Mike.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions on anything Georgia Department of Insurance based?
No.
So the next item there, Aaron, if we can go back to the bullet screen, thank you. Just sort of a general Medicaid update, as you all know, and as we probably are all seeing on television, the race for governor has officially started, and you may be wondering, what does that have to do with the Medicaid update? I think it's safe to assume the number one issue in the campaign that we're about to see unfold, at least in the general election, will be the discussion of Medicaid expansion. As you know, there's been various waivers and sort of back and forth between the two administrations that have overlapped this gubernatorial term, and sort of the posture we're in. We'll sort of talk about that, but at least in the Atlanta airwaves, we've already seen one of the big groups that we expect to be a major player over the next year as we endure a race for governor will be the issue of Medicaid expansion, which is a little interesting. You get beyond the politics of it. As a reminder to all of you, only the legislature may determine whether or not Georgia expands Medicaid. It is not a function of our governor, whoever the governor is. It is a function solely of the General Assembly, and to date, there are no movements afoot beyond the various waiver programs that we've seen over the last couple of years, both the Deal administration and the first years of the Kemp administration. We are embroiled in the process with the U.S. Health and Human Services Department, and that is sort of a laborious process. We anticipate some word over the next 6 months to a year. So my guess is we'll get some word over our future about the time it's election day. So that ought to add to a little bit of the chaos of the election here. In terms of the mechanics of the Medicaid and how that is working, as Devin sort of alluded to, and many of you may have experienced, there has been an entire agency turnover, certainly at the top, and then certainly as you work through the various departments that make up DCH. At present, we are without a Medicaid director going on now about 6 months, I believe. So when Ree posed the question, well, who's running it? Right now, it's Deputy Commissioner Ryan Loke, who for his had been with the Kemp administration, is his health policy aide for the first really two and a half, 3 years, and then recently moved over to DCH with the new commissioner. So lots of moving parts. Obviously, we're always, seems like every time we look up, we're talking about the CMO recoupment process, a reprocurement process, what the timeline is, and strangely, over the last decade, we've seen those timelines and deadlines and contract end dates always sort of mysteriously get kicked out with little fanfare or notice. At present, we understand that we will see the procurement process over the next year for 2023. We've been assured by the current crop of leaders over there that there will be a robust public and stakeholder period where they listen to concerns and, as I like to say, ways they can do it better. So we'll keep everybody apprised as that moves along. I do expect it to be somewhat a topic of discussion of the legislative session, though we don't necessarily intend to anticipate it being legislation. So you'll hear, I think, complaints from legislators around the state that are hearing from folks like you all that are having some real life examples, whether it be with sort of in the reign of the Department of Insurance, whether it be specifically to Medicaid or state health benefit plan. So another reason to remain sort of plugged in with your local leader. In terms of the 3 or 4 carriers, we don't know necessarily anything more than what's been out there in the public sphere. But as a reminder, from the time of its inception, my understanding is it was always intended to be 3, and at the last real procurement process, because one of the original 3 did not make the cut, the prior administration opened it up to 4. As you all know, Centene recently bought WellCare, so we're back down to 3. One of the curious things is internally we talked with Mike, John, and Robin. In the last time there was a true procurement effort, there were a number of companies, number of insurers, whether they were not-for-profit or not, that were looking at Georgia, and they sort of engaged in the public affairs arena and with various efforts, lobbyists and other such endeavors. They would sort of raise their profile with legislators. We've not seen any of that to date. So I'm not sure if you can sort of glean into that there other than maybe say United or one of the other known actors here in the insurance world, but have not seen some of that engagement that we've seen in years past. As an example, CareSource implemented a fairly robust public affairs campaign when they came into the state and were vying for those contracts back at the last call for RFPs. Mike, John, anything else we would like us to address on the issue of Medicaid?
Yeah, for me, Travis, there's two things that seeking guidance on. The first off is I think everybody on this call would agree that when we went back, when we were at 3 CMOs, it was a horrific interaction with the CMOs in terms of getting them to cooperate and do the things that they needed to do, and it was harmful to many providers in the state. When they went to 4, and particularly when it became more competition by regions, all of a sudden the CMOs became more, willing to work, coordinate, things of that nature. And so it has worked better with 4. I know you don't control that, but the first question is, what do we need to do to be able to shed the importance of that 4th CMO versus the C and the impact that it's had? And so that part I'm asking. And then the second thing is, when they had their original stakeholder meetings years ago, I don't think that the rural providers had the same voice that the urban providers had in those stakeholder meetings. Any direction how to influence this? I would argue that a pediatrician in rural Georgia has a very different practice than a pediatrician in greater Atlanta.
Certainly. I mean, I think this is where it's sort of lobbying 101 and advocacy 101. I think we absolutely is providers, the provider community, whether it be hospitals or physicians, have got to make sure we're telling our story. If we're not telling our story, I can assure you somebody else is. So I think having those key relationships are absolutely critical and crucial as we move into that arena, and it often dovetails with a larger discussion of reform and sort of moving forward in the General Assembly. So if they're not hearing from us, and with all due respect, I'm this will be my 22nd legislative session, and I feel like an old light fixture around here, but as effective as we are in sort of working with Mike and John and Robin, when they hear from a provider, or somebody that actually has got experience and is in the trench every day, they remember that as well. So I think it all dovetails together. To Dr. Lewis's question on the meeting chat, in short, do the billions of dollars and the struggling rural hospitals across Georgia, does it resonate with policymakers here at the Capitol? And I would say yes, it does. But I think you have a very philosophical and political divide over those funds. And Strategic Health, unless Mike or John jump in, haven't really weighed in other than sort of the mechanics of how it all works in Woodwork, and more importantly, how it works right now under current law and the current trajectory that we are under with the state and the policy decisions that the state has made. And that's sort of where we have to deal with the reality. But I think we had hosted about 20 legislators the first part of December, and it was a bipartisan mix of both Republicans and Democrats in both the State House and the State Senate. And for the first time in this, and you figure this debate has been out there now for, this will be the 12th year of the Affordable Care Act. And it generally has been fairly civil over those years, but this year it had a decidedly terse and very hostile dialogue with each other. And these are people that, by and large, on issues, work together, and that has been one of the unsung heroes of the Georgia General Assembly, regardless of party. They have been able to pass things in bipartisan form. But this issue, I think, divides the General Assembly, divides our leaders. Frankly, it divides the provider community, and it comes down to a philosophical divide on those dollars. From the state side, if you look at the Office of Planning and Budget, they have their projections as to what the true cost would be, and that seems to be where there's a hard swallow on terms of leadership in what the long-term expanse and expense would be to the department and to the state. Right now, just as a point of reminder, one of the largest spends by state government to date are in two categories. One is education, which I think everybody can sort of wrap their head around. The second one is health spending via the Department of Community Health. The budget there, and I can tell you over the last couple of years, is on a clear upward trajectory, as you might expect, but it has jumped quite largely from the single-digit billions to today, somewhere we'll see next week, somewhere between $14 and $15 billion. So it is something that leaders from both parties do grapple with in terms of, at some point in a state where it is highly unpopular to raise taxes, what do you do? And the buy down, drawdown at the federal level, as everybody knows, has a finite end date. So it becomes a grand public policy conundrum.
Yeah, I think the subtext of the second question from Dr. Lewis there, and maybe you were just addressing that, do you think they understand the difference? Maybe you were just talking about this, but do you think the legislators understand the difference between the enhancement of the Medicaid schedule that occurred in the past and generally raising the standard fee schedule? Or, is there any stomach at the legislative level to use the surplus we have now to just address 21-year-old rates in general, rather than any of the other kind of sexy or nuanced kind of programs to just get the pricing up?
Yeah, and traditionally we see them. I know one of the areas that we have intimate knowledge on was, as an example, the dental rates, and for the better part of Baker's dozen years, the dental rates had been frozen, and it's amazing. We as human beings get excited when they add a couple of pennies to those payments, but in the long term, it's all about making the number go up. I think the answer is it's a shades of gray, Mike and Dr. Lewis. I think the appropriators understand the nuances. And then the rank and file member of the General Assembly, the appropriations process is ungodly complicated, as you might expect, when you factor in the myriad of things that state government has to fund, and then there are the items it chooses to fund, and then there are the federal drawdowns and how all of that works together, and then what process of it gets shipped out to some other entity like a local government. So it's incredibly complicated. The question, do rank and file members of the General Assembly understand it? Maybe to the extent that they hear about it from providers and hospitals. But I think, as always, you got to remember sort of what you're dealing with. We have a part-time legislature that is representative government, so they come from all walks of life. We have only a handful of members that have any kind of healthcare experience. We have the physician members, but then we probably have an additional 5 to dozen allied health providers or spouses or parents, what have you. So it is, I think the question sort of posed does sort of expose the issue here, which is it is an ungodly, like all of this stuff, ungodly complicated. And then the knowledge base of those making the decisions is sometimes not as great as it could be.
Travis, do you think that one of the things that impacts this as well is that at least currently with all of the divisions of the state, that the vast majority of the leaders of those divisions are budget people, that you have very little, there's very little clinical or anything else. I mean, there are budget people there that are there to manage the dollars. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, and that's a great point, John. DCH, over my time here, has had physician leadership or people that were steeped in healthcare policy. We actually had a 2-for-1 came from Florida. She was a physician and was an effective communicator and leader and sort of understood that. Unfortunately, she left and went to work at United and has been there for about 15 years. So she went to the dark side. But right now, a fiscal hawk is running DCH. She's been there for maybe 4 months or so. And she, I believe, based on what her comments when we met with her, and certainly hearing the governor, she was sent there to sort of bring order to a very large, very expensive agency. We do have a physician provider running public health, but public health, as we all know, has sort of taken a beating on a number of fronts, and they are a much smaller fiscal line item in the budget. Behavioral health, we have had physicians running that entity, another big coster in the overall budget. But John, that's a great point. We have a lot of folks that are singularly focused on that budget. I would note this is maybe the second year in a row or second budget in a row where there has not been a decree from the governor's office as they prepare their budgets that they are to be at zero in terms of there's no additional spending. That certainly was the practice deployed by the last administration for 8 years. And once we went through sort of the draconian cuts of the first episode of COVID, they have been now sort of relaxing it a little bit because the monthly tax take for the state has been up. So at least the state is headed in an upward direction.
All right, we will we'll move on to the State No Surprises Act, or the surprise billing legislation that officially passed in the 2020 legislative session, which was House Bill 888 by Representative Lee Hawkins. That legislation officially went into effect as of January 1st of 2021, and then really started to go through the payment claims and arbitration process in July 1st of 2021. So I'm sure there's a few of you here on the phone who have gone through that process. If you have not, and kind of a brief summary of what that legislation does, and then in accordance with the federal No Surprises Act, which officially began January 1st, so just about 12 days ago. And to bring you up to speed, let me first on the federal side, there's been some heavy pushback from the AMA, as well as the Orthopedic Society. The American College of Emergency Physicians have pushed back pretty heavily on the federal No Surprises Act, mainly just not the fact that they don't like what the outcome of it is, but the execution of it, and specifically through the arbitration process. So to kind of back up as far as where Georgia is, the being that it started July 1st of 2021, the Georgia Department of Insurance did negotiate with the Fair Health database and that's kind of a mixture of the payer and physician claims to come up with basically an arbitration agreement to where both the physician and the payer can go to arbitration for those claims or those leftover dollars, if you will, that the patient didn't have to pay in their in-network out-of-pocket costs. So the Georgia Department of Insurance implemented that July 1st. They have started to go through the arbitration process. We've been keeping a close watch on that really on a monthly basis. It got off to a rough start, mainly because a lot of the arbitration paperwork was being done in literal paperwork and physical paperwork, where physicians or administrators were having to handwrite and then get stuff over to the Georgia Department of Insurance, and it was literally being printed off and then reviewed by some of their internal staff. That was simply really a clerical matter that they didn't have the team and the staff members to really to get the electronic version of it up and running. However, as of November of 2021, that process is now, as we understand it, running fairly smooth. Again, I would say if you're hearing or you see issues yourself, send them to Mike and John to where we can kind of run the traps on the back end with our folks to make sure that those claims are being paid out. The arbitration process is going through smoothly. There is generally about a 30-day wait period from the time that the Georgia Department of Insurance receives that surprise billing or the arbitration request to where there's 30 days in between there that it would have to be settled, paid, or what have you. So that's really where it stands with the No Surprises Act. Mike, John, I'm happy to answer questions on that, and then I wanted to touch on the all payer claims database as well.
Go for it.
So the Office of Health Strategy and Coordination, and Travis mentioned them earlier, they fall up under the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. There's recently appointed a new director as of about 6 or 7 months ago. We've worked closely with him in past years. He was in the government affairs realm like Travis and myself years ago, so have built up a good rapport with him. But he had reached out to us looking for individuals, physicians, stakeholders in the area that would have an interest in kind of retooling or looking at the all payer claims database and really what it entails. So for those of you that don't know this, the all payer claims database is really, it's state databases, including medical, pharmacy, dental claims, and eligibility and files collected from private and public payers, really they're directly reported by insurers to the state. So it's a hard look at what that all payer claims database is, what it does, and then how it interacts with not only the surprise billing legislation, but really across the spectrum in the state side of things. So all of that to say, when Grant had reached out to us, we put Mike and John and the SHP team in touch with Grant to actually be a part of that stakeholder group. So I know, and Mike and John probably have a little bit better handle on it. We do not participate in those calls, but they did do an official kickoff call. I believe it was prior to the holidays. And they're looking to do an additional 5 of those calls / stakeholder meetings into May or June, and hopefully have a finished product of what that looks like. Mike, John, and if Kelly's on, I know y'all are on the call. Anything you want to add about specifics and what they're looking to do? John, I know you and I have had some conversations of some of the things that they may not actually be looking at that we'd like to present to them, but I'll pitch it to you for a little bit of the details on it.
Yeah, I know I know we're running out of time, but I will say this: we're grateful for the opportunity to be on this committee. It is clear to me, and Kelly and Mike can certainly add to this. It was clear to us that this was a very academic committee. We are the only people in that committee that actually represent caregivers in this state, and so it is incumbent upon us to understand, while they're looking at this from an academic perspective, what the impact of this has on providers. And if we weren't on it, I don't think they will have that visualization at all. And so we're very appreciative that we're able to be on this committee.
Yeah, and I think John really hit it on the head. That there is a conglomerate of folks that they have compiled to put on these committees, and I believe there's three subcommittees: the use case, a data and privacy, and I believe an IT, if you will, subcommittee that will then come together and put together the recommendations that then they're going to pass along to the governor's office and then to the legislature. But we'll be working over the next few months, certainly closely with Mike and John and Robin, as well as the rest of the SHP team, to make sure that the folks over there in the Office of Planning and Budget have a firm grasp and really how the all payer claims database should move forward for the state.
All right, we've got about 6 or 7 minutes left. I know you all are used to, and we want to end by 1 o'clock. One final item there is the state health benefit plan. The process, as we understand it right now, is that it will be much like the Medicaid CMO plans. It will be up for reprocurement for next year. A lot of angst with sort of legislators in the know, certainly those that have a healthcare background, that we continue to have all of these issues with one carrier, and then they are the beneficiary of one of the largest, if not the largest plan in the state. So I would surmise that we'll continue to hear news on that front. One of the questions was, do the DOI fines towards Anthem actually end up costing the state more? Well, I think that's a great question. Certainly the behavior underway right now seems to have caught policymakers' eyes in Atlanta right now. As some of you may know, we're watching Anthem and Northside battle it out in court over their contract. So it continues to be almost a weekly story of which system has fallen out of grace with one of them. So we'll continue to watch that, engage where we can on your behalf. It again, as a reminder, as you stumble across, usually in the hard way matters, certainly reach out to the collective team here so we can pass it up the chain. Mike, John, anything on that matter?
Yeah, Dev, just real quick. I mean, Travis, we were talking about earlier about the DCH has been gutted as far as personnel. So when we get ready to go through the procurements, do you think that they're going to have the infrastructure to really look at change versus just checking the same box they've checked for the last few decades? Or do you think that's going to require political pressure for them to be engaged in looking at alternatives?
Oh, I think most assuredly it will require political pressure. It's government. It doesn't change on its own. So obviously the elections of this year, both in the General Assembly and the governorship, will play a key role in what that looks like. So yeah, some hard discussions and a lot of work to do in that vein.
Agreed.
All right. Next up, just sort of looking ahead, one of the perennial issues for the House of Medicine is always, is there going to be any tort reform or any CON reform? There was a valiant attempt, I guess 2 years ago now, dealing with one of the largest coalitions I've ever seen come together that sort of represented all walks of business and life in Georgia. And it fell very far from passage because the political dynamic in both chambers. And then on CON reform, thankfully, last year was the first session in probably over 15 to 20 years where not a single piece of CON reform or change legislation had been introduced. So I suspect we'll hear something about it this year just because that's how it works. But there is absolutely no sign or appetite to want to take that up in what will already be a very politically charged legislative session. So with that, are there any outstanding questions we're happy to address?
Travis, I want you to verify something for me if you don't mind. And this is going to sound like I'm endorsing something, and that's really not my intent. But I do want to point out, because of Travis and Devin, historically, we have had a really great relationship with the Medical Association of Georgia. And we do have clients that are members of MAG. And we know not everyone's members of MAG, but we had that relationship, and we had it particularly with Donald Palmisano, and Donald has moved on, the executive director has moved on to other opportunities, and there's new leadership there. But moving through these channels is also about friends and comrades and helping you to achieve success. And so for those of you who are members of Medical Association of Georgia, it is important that we can collaborate with you so that you are the face of some of these issues, so that MAG can champion some of these same issues as well, because it really helps when they're engaged. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. I mean, the old we're stronger together is absolutely true in this arena and this era. So yeah, and we encourage you to be a member of everything that you can be, because it's one more way to help make sure your story is told and you and your patients are represented. So absolutely.
Well, good deal. Let's wrap it up there. Thank you all very much, Devin, Travis. Great job. We're very appreciative. If we get any follow-up questions from anybody else, we'll shoot them your way. As always, we know where you are. But thank you. That was great information. Very, very helpful. And we'll let it go. Thank y'all. Appreciate everybody who was on with us today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.